What's happening, guys? So today I wanted to share an experience that I had, and I don't really know what to call it, but it was very perplexing and confusing how it was even physically possible. I guess it could be considered like street theater. I know that this is part of people's gang stalking experiences a lot of times. Just really weird things that happen that just kind of have you scratching your head. So this was one of those because I don't understand how it was even physically done, let alone like why, other than it just left me like really confused. It was a strange scenario that didn't make logical sense to me. So I will tell it how it happened and leave it at that. You know, if you guys have had similar uh, testimonies or things that have happened, let me know because this one is just like bizarre. Um, so this was during my second gang stalking experiences. Like I kind of went through two different like rounds, you could say, that were several years apart. But this is like it got really heavy the second time. I'd say more heavy than the first in a lot of ways. It was kind of a little bit different the second time I started experiencing it, but I would say more elaborate, like street theater, where it just felt like stage things that were happening around me. And so I was heading into work, and my boss lived in a neighborhood that I was heading over towards because I was going to meet up with him and then go to a job site. And they were making traffic revisions going into his neighborhood. So normally, like from where I was living, I would just turn left into his neighborhood. But they had kind of reconfigured the exit and made it to where you couldn't take a left there anymore. So instead of taking a left on this stoplight, normally I'd go here. I couldn't do that anymore. It was prohibited. So I went straight through the light. So the neighborhood's on my left. And I went up to the first driveway where I could flip around and then come back towards the intersection and take a right into the neighborhood. So initially when I went through the intersection, there was nothing going on there, nothing strange. And I went up maybe a quarter mile. So like I'm saying tops from the time I went through the intersection to where I pulled into the driveway and turned around and I'm coming back towards the intersection. Maybe less than a minute even. Because I can see the intersection from a ways off, so it's not like they could have done anything in that time. It was basically from the time I went through it, turned around, and went back. This is where it gets weird, guys. So I'm coming up to the intersection and I see the first thing I see is there's a vehicle in the middle of the intersection, like where you're not supposed to be parked. So I was like, oh, maybe their car stalled out or something and they might need a push or whatever. But as I get closer, the scene gets more strange because there was a backhoe, you know, the claw part, I forget the name of it, but the bucket of it. There was a bucket broken through the windshield. Like, so the vehicle stalled out in the middle of the intersection. There's a bucket that was inside of the windshield, like someone had just dropped it through the windshield. And the weirdest part about it, I mean, that was weird, right? But obviously accidents can happen and things like that, but there was no backhoe. There was no heavy machinery sitting right there. There was also no one else there. The driver wasn't in the car. There was no passengers. There was no one outside of the car. There was no other vehicles around. It was just this car with a bucket through the windshield sitting in the middle of the intersection. In the intersection that I just drove past less than a minute before. So I'm like, how? I was just so confused, right? And I was kind of like running late too, so I didn't stop and check it out. I kind of wish I would have now, just to try to make sense of it, but I had to get to work. So I just left feeling really confused. Like, how did that get in through the windshield, and how did that car get there in the time that I went through the intersection and turned around? Like, it was just an impossible, seemingly impossible stunt that made no logical sense. And where was the driver? Where was the passenger? Like, if this was some sort of accident, you'd think like people would be there. And how did they even get the car in there and get away in that amount of time? It was just like so weird, right? And yeah, like a bunch of stuff was happening at this time. Like, this is where it started picking up really heavy, and even had some situations at work that got really weird too. But I had went into, my boss's house, and basically I was telling him, man, I had a really weird night last night, man. Stuff was crazy because a bunch of stuff had happened the night before. And it's like these guys that I worked with were kind of just like laughing and like snickering about it. And I was like, yeah. And I just came over to this intersection. I told them what had happened. And then their only response to one of them, he was like, "All right, someone's morning was ruined." And he was like laughing about it. Is this a really weird response? So I don't know. It to me, it just seemed like an elaborate street theater that I don't know how they physically pulled off. The coordination to pull that off was just unbelievable. So, but then you add in the time that it would take and the effort, it was weird. And obviously, maybe it was some sort of freak accident, but we all know when we're going through the Gangstalking stuff that there's stuff that happens is just unexplainable. So that's one of the things that happened. Let me know if something similar you guys have experienced. See you guys later.